I dare not go, for if I do,
All right,
my mother will say,
everybody, we're gonna have people starting to file in. We'll give it just a couple minutes as everybody joins up. Welcome everybody.
down by the bay, where the watermelons grow, back to my home. It's just because Phil loves this song.
Feel like this is a good start.
I dare not go, for if I do, my mother will say, Hey, Phil, did you ever see a Kentucky Wildcat taking down a volunteer?
No. And what?
Basketball.
When?
Down by the bay, where the watermelons grow, back to my home. I dare not go, for if I do.
And we are getting this live on Facebook too, by the way. Just
Oh,
while
that's
everybody's
good.
starting to file in, we're getting that broadcast live. Give us just a minute, everybody, while people get into the webinar. And actually, this is one of the first times I haven't seen the list of people in the waiting room filled with note takers, AI note
Oh,
takers. Usually, we've got almost as many note takers nowadays as we do actual people. So
Is
unusual today
is
not
that
to
a
see
good
that.
thing or is that a
I
bad
think that's
thing?
a good thing. We've got a bunch of real
Okay. All
people. I
right.
love to see that.
Okay. All right.
All right, very good. We still have some people starting to file in, but we got a good number of people, so we'll go ahead and kick things off. Welcome everybody to the September PMAssist webinar here with our partner OnSight Pros. We've got Phil Owen. Welcome, Phil.
Thanks, Todd. Good to be here.
Phil is not just one of mine, but one of Abby's, also one of our good friends from the industry. Known each other for, I don't know, long, long time. We've been using OnSight Pros for forever now. I can't even remember when we started, but it's been a while. So love to have Phil on. We're going to talk about a number of different things today, related to just property awareness in general, but about property inspections, particularly different types of inspections, the importance of actual in-person inspections, and a lot of different things associated with that. So if anybody has any questions or anything as we're going along, feel free to use the Q&A box at the bottom, or the button to submit your questions. Abby will keep track of those, and we'll try to get to some here, either as we go along or at the end, when we have covered everything. But Phil, why don't we start off with you just start off a little bit about you, so your background, and then how you came to be the CEO of OnSight Pros, and then we'll get into what you guys do.
Yeah, well, thanks for the intro. I am, my degree is in philosophy, which, natural tie into property management. Like it was just set me up for this, I think. But no, I actually lived in Texas and was friends with a guy named James Alderson, who is the founder of OnSight Pros, and he actually kind of brought me into this space. I had never had any understanding of property management, but gosh, that was probably 12 years ago now. And so my background was in fiber optic telecommunications, which is only slightly more relevant to property management than philosophy. But no, I jumped in with James. He built this company and had a real vision for it. Jumped in with him to help him expand it. He had started it just in the San Antonio market and wanted to expand it out and make it available to more property managers. And we jumped in to expand property awareness across the country for third-party property managers.
Nice, nice. Yeah, you actually, I didn't know that, but you were actually getting started in the industry right around the same time I was. I was 2012, so I guess you were right around there or just after. So
Right in that ballpark. That's right.
that's crazy, but
Yeah.
excellent. Well, very good. So let's start off with, you use the term property awareness there, which
Yeah.
isn't probably a widely used term in the industry, although it's probably becoming more widely used as you've been using it for a few years now. But kind of tell us what you mean by that when you say property awareness. What all does that encompass?
Yeah, I'll actually give credit where credit is due. I stole that from Thad Tarkington. I sat on a panel at IMN with Thad, and that was the first time I heard the term property awareness. And I was like, that's the thing. That's what we do. But what we talk about with property awareness is just knowing what is going on at the property at various points during the lease. So being able to have documentation, being able to have awareness of how the property is performing, of the systems of the property, of how the property is being maintained by the resident, and being able to have systems in place as a business to manage proactively based on what's happening at the property instead of just waiting for things to go wrong and putting out fires as they come.
Nice. Yeah, this is something, people underestimate the importance of this. Even property managers underestimate the importance of this. I remember it was probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 years ago now. I was at a Florida State conference, and for those who don't remember, there was a guy who was known. Sometimes people call me Todd Father, but there was a guy who was known as the Godfather of property management in Florida, Gene Bennett,
Mm,
who he's been in the business forever. He had a business. I think they managed something like 1,500 units in Central Florida
mm,
back in the day before he sold it. And I remember talking to him about inspections, particularly because in retirement, he's been doing a lot of expert witness testimony and consulting and that kind of thing. And he was, when I was talking to him, he was actually just finishing up a case where he was testifying in court as an expert witness against a property manager. And he was hired by a landlord because a tenant had just absolutely destroyed this house over a period of a few years, to where it was basically a complete rebuild, and the property manager had never laid eyes on this house for years. They moved this tenant in and they never saw it after that. And the owner was someone, I guess, who knew Gene. And they came to him and said, "Is this normal that a property manager doesn't look at a house?" And he said, "Well, that's certainly not how we did it. We always inspected these houses." So,
mhm.
it was the owner lost or the owner won that case against the property manager because
Yeah.
they weren't inspecting, even though if your management agreement doesn't speak to it, doesn't specifically say anything about inspections, there's still this reasonable expectation on the part of a landlord that you're going to look at the house, unless you flat out tell people we are not going to do this,
Yeah.
and you get an indemnification clause for it, that there's an expectation that you're going to. So,
You
Phil,
know,
when we think about what that entails, how often should property managers be inspecting houses? What kind of inspections should they be doing?
yeah, let me tell you another story though, similar to what you're talking about, Todd. I was talking to a member of the North Carolina Real Estate Commission a year ago, and they were telling me that they had heard a case where a house had been completely destroyed, resident moved out, and the landlord filed a complaint against the property manager for having never been to the property. And not only did they win in court, and not only was that complaint successful, they took the broker's license. And uh, I said, well, what North Carolina statute mandates that they go to the property? And she used the same phrase you did. She said, there's a reasonable expectation that property managers are physically getting into the property. And if you're not, then you need to have signed by the landlord saying you agree that this is not part of the service that we're providing. But if you don't have that, there's a reasonable expectation that property managers are actually getting into the properties. And I spoke with her about it, and you know, we talked back and forth a little bit. She said that she would love to see, property managers getting in quarterly. As we discussed it, I was like, now don't get me wrong, as a person who does this for a living, I would love it if all of our clients did that. I actually advise against that. I think
Yeah.
quarterly is too often. I think you interfere with reasonable expectations of the tenant to have private, quiet enjoyment. But no, we actually recommend at least once a year, uh, and in most cases twice a year, particularly if an animal is present, getting into the property at least twice a year. Um, what we recommend is at month 3, and then again at month 9. So month 3 is that first look to just check and see, find out what's going on, know how they're caring for it before it gets too far down the road. And then month 9 is where you start your lease renewal process, where you're deciding if you're going to renew the lease. Um, so that's our recommendation as far as mid lease assessments is getting in there at month 3 and month 9.
Yeah, I like that. That's basically how we do it. Except we make the second inspection optional for our clients. It's up to them.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, kind of the same timing. That 3 month mark is good because they've settled in. You kind of know how they're going to treat the house at that point. You're getting a good idea when you look at it to see. All right, we kind of know how this is going to look going forward. And then of
That's
course
right.
at the 9 month mark, for most of us, our lease renewal process is starting somewhere around a couple months before the lease
Yeah.
expires. So we got time there to get an inspection in, figure out whether the tenant's taking good care of it. And, for us anyway, we'll change the renewal rate based on how well they're taking care of the house. If they're taking real good care of it, we're going to be much more nice to you, and the rental
That's
rate we
right.
set for your renewal. So, you can use this for multiple things. It's not just for keeping an eye on condition and letting the owner know about the condition. You can also use it for rent increases and all sorts of things.
Yeah.
But one thing you mentioned there, Phil, that I wanted to jump on was, especially if there's an animal in the house, you want to have something done twice. And people who read our newsletter or watch our webinars like this all the time know that I'm a huge advocate of allowing pets in rental properties. But this is a very important thing to do. I mean, how many property managers do you work with are actually being proactive about doing pet inspections? Is that something you're seeing a lot of now?
Yeah, almost all of our clients, if there is a pet on the property, they do the 3-month pet inspection at the tenant's expense, where that's part of what they build in, is that, as a requirement, if you're going to have a pet, is you agree to submit to a mid-lease pet assessment at your expense, where we're going to send an independent third party, and they're going to photo document the entirety of the property so that we can send photo evidence to the landlord that your pet is not causing unnecessary damage. And to your point, at month 3, you kind of know how they're treating the house, but it's not so far down the road that it's irreparable. Like, you can intervene and actually remedy things if you get in at month 3 and go, okay, this is going sideways. Let's come up with how we're going to fix this. But yeah, almost all of our clients, when there's a pet present, which according to pet screening is about 73% of all single family residential properties, have at least one pet on the lease. Or
Crazy.
not
That
on the
number.
lease, but in the property. It's not always on the lease, as you full well know. But 73% statistically have at least one pet in the property.
Yeah, that number keeps increasing, by the way, everybody. I remember when pet screening first came on the scene, I think that number was 40%, and then it jumped up above 50% during COVID, and then it's not going down. It just keeps
Yeah.
skyrocketing. More and more people have pets, and that's more and more reason why you need to have actual eyes, and I will say not just eyes, but nose on the property also. You need to be smelling what's going on in this place. So, that kind of leads me to the next thing, which is there's all this, everybody wants to talk about AI nowadays. Everybody wants to talk about automation and how they can reduce their man count, or, how are we going to be more efficient? And one of the things people do is they go to self inspections, or they go to Zoom inspections. I've seen some people do that, which maybe is a little bit better than just a photo self inspection, but it's still not being at the house.
Yeah.
So, what are your thoughts on this, and what, because you guys obviously see more houses than any other property manager. So, with
Yeah.
what you guys see, what are the reasons that someone should not just rely upon self inspections for these things?
Yeah, I think that's a fair question, and I will say, yeah, I'm actually I'm a convert on tenant self inspections. When people first started talking to me about that, I was like, that is perhaps the worst idea that I've ever heard in my entire life. But as I pondered it more, I started to see the value in it. However, I see it as a supplement to, not a replacement for, getting professional eyes on the property, whether that's your own eyes or a third party like OnSight Pros. Getting somebody on the property still matters. And the reason is, regardless of how good the technology is, whether it's AI that's analyzing, or you're using a tenant self-inspection app, or you're using, you're doing a live Zoom and you can give, direction of, hey, point the camera here, do this, do that, whatever. Even with that, one of the challenges that we have with our technicians is, you get to the property, and our technicians use iPads as opposed to iPhones, and they have a tendency to look at the property through the iPad. And we teach them, we're like, you can't look at your device. Look with your eyes and document with your iPad. Because when you're looking at the 2 dimension, you're losing a lot of the value of being there. And so just seeing it on a screen is not the same as being there. Mark Ennis came up with the phrase, get your head out of your app. Which I think is pretty freaking hilarious. So well done, Mark, if you're watching. But just seeing it on a 2-dimensional screen, you miss a lot. But regardless of that, one of the things, when we go to a property, every single room that we walk into, the very first question it asks on every room in the property, it asks the technician, do you smell anything of note? Because the longer you're in a property, you'll start to become nose blind. So every room, it asks them very first question, do you notice anything? And if you say, yeah, I notice it, you have to describe what you see. There is not a resident in the world that, whether you're doing a tenant self-inspection with an app or you're doing a Zoom walkthrough, that's going to go, by the way, I know everything looks nice, but it smells like cat pee in here because my cat is dominating this house, or, I was talking to somebody a couple of days ago and they're like, yeah, we just had a move out and they smoked in bed in that property for 4 years and we didn't know it because we hadn't been in the property. Even if they vacuum up the ashes and the house looks clean and good, if you're not going to the property, no resident's going to be like, by the way, stinks of cigarette smoke in here. Like, that is real damage that takes real remediation at the end of a lease. And that's going to lead to a lawsuit when the owner goes, why didn't you know about this? Oh, I don't know. The tenant didn't say anything in their self-inspection. Well, that's not going to go over well, So
yeah, it's obviously those things, but I mean, I'll say something we've caught, and it's been years ago now where we caught this, was we had a tenant who they kept making excuses for why they didn't want us to come out and see the house. And this might have been this might have even been before we started using OnSight. We might have been doing it ourselves. I can't even remember now, but they didn't want us to come in. We finally got them to schedule, go into the house, and they have a certain room locked. It's just blocked off. You can't go into this room. We're like, no, that we have to see in every single room of this house. And one of the things I noticed with a lot of these self-inspections is they're only doing some of the basics. And, they're not getting pictures of every little corner of every little room. When we opened that room finally and got in there, it was a marijuana grow farm is what was going on.
Yeah.
I mean, everybody knows me. I don't care about marijuana, but I don't want my owners to get in trouble for, having a grow farm going on at their property. That's a problem. Not to mention that the cops a lot of times can find out that because of the amount of electricity you're drawing and all kinds of stuff. And suddenly,
well, and that's still illegal in Georgia. And in
Yeah.
Colorado, that's an upgrade to the house, but in Georgia, not as much, right?
Exactly. So, there's all kinds of things you're looking for here. You're not, you're looking for obviously property condition. You're looking for smell. You're looking for pets, but you're looking for illegal activity too. I mean, this is one of the things that we tell owners. I think it's in our FAQ on our website, where if an owner says, well, I don't want to pay for inspections because, I'm just comfortable. The tenant's been in the house for 3 years and they're taking good care of it. And our answer is always, well, maybe they've been taking good care of the house, but we still don't know what they're going to do in that house 2 years from now. What if they lose their job and suddenly they're running a daycare out of their basement? We're only going to know that if we go out and actually look at it. Or we have you guys do it, is what we do. But someone needs to actually go out and see that, because if you just do a self-inspection and all they're doing is taking a photo of the front and the yard and getting the furnace filters, you're not getting everything. And that's what a lot of those self-inspections have been pared back to, because we want to make them easy, right? We want to make it so the person can do the inspection easily and not complain that they're spending so much time. So we've cut back on so much of what's included in those self-inspections that it's rendered almost useless in some cases. So
well, and even when they're doing a really thorough one, and I'll say there's some good softwares that you can custom. I mean, Z Inspector has a really robust. You can make it as simple or as thorough as you want. But even with that, if I'm a resident, all I have to do is take the photo at the right angle or move what I don't want to be in the picture from this room to that room while I take the picture and then move it back. It's just so easy to hide that, to sort of conceal the things that you don't want them to see. I joke that it's kind of like, having a tenant do a self-inspection, because on a periodic, you're really looking for three things. Are they doing what they're supposed to be doing? Mowing the yard? Are they changing the batteries in the smoke alarm, changing the air filters, right? Are they not doing the things that they're not supposed to be doing? Smoking in the property, illicit pets, over occupancy, illegal activity. And then you're looking for, risk, liability type of issues. A tenant self-inspection can do one of those things, which is to say, are they doing the things they're supposed to be doing? You can proactively say, take a picture of this. I want to see that you've mowed the yard. But to use that and go, by the way, anything that you shouldn't be doing, can you take a picture of that and make sure that we know things that, like, that's not what a tenant self-inspection is going to be valuable for. It's the equivalent of, when you're moving a renter in going, by the way, we're not going to run an actual background check. Anything we should know? Do you pay your bills well? Or you're going to pay, right? Like we're good. Like you can't outsource to the tenant a background check and say, just tell me what we need to know, any more than you can outsource property awareness and go, just tell me what we need to know. There's still accountability that needs to happen. But I think, what I think is really valuable, and I talk about doing it at month 3 and at month 9, what I think is really valuable is having a tenant self-inspection like at month 6 and at month 12, where you just say, hey, I want you to take these 5 photos. I want to take a picture of the front yard and the backyard. I want to see that you've mowed once since we were there 3 months ago. Take a picture of the air filter. I want to see that since we were there 3 months ago, you have a fresh air filter in there. If it's the same air filter that was there 3 months ago, we have a problem with that. Maybe have them take a picture of all of their smoke alarms to make sure that they haven't taken them down and put them in a drawer because they had nuisance alarms, whatever the things are, and you can make it, related to the time of year. You guys in Georgia, y'all had a big freeze last year. So if you say, hey, it's getting to November, I want you to take a picture showing me that you have put hose bib covers on all of your outdoor water spigots, whatever that may be, make it 4 or 5 pictures, but it gets you an additional look. And I think that's where the value of tenant self-inspections is you get additional look without having to have the expense or the interruption to the resident's life of going to the property. But I do think there's a lot of value in tenant self-inspections, but you can't replace going to the property yourself or having somebody like OnSight Pros doing it with it. Like to me, that's an irresponsible use of the software.
Yeah, I agree 100%. I think I wrote an article on it maybe 6 months or so ago. If anybody wants to check it out on the Substack, I'm a big believer, the same way Phil is, that this is a great supplement. It's a great way to where you can show the owner, hey, look, we've got another report for you. It's only been 3 months since the last one, but this one isn't as detailed as the other one you got, but it's a look at your house, every 3 months. And that's a great way to show some extra value and some extra transparency to the client. And it gives you, of course, an extra view into the house too, as well as the client, but it's great as a supplemental thing.
Yeah.
It does not make me feel comfortable as to whether we're actually keeping a real eye on the property, though. We need to do that at least once a year to see how things are going before we renew a lease, at least. So yeah, I'm with you 100% on all of that. Now let's talk about the actual reports that you guys are doing. So we've talked a lot about periodics, but the reality is you guys are doing move-ins, move-outs, all kinds of different stuff, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. So our 4 basic reports that we do are move in, where, our goal at a move in is you want to document every square foot of the property. We use 360 cameras. We're documenting inside and outside of cabinets and drawers to show, hey, it was clean and empty when you moved in and you gave it back to me greasy, grimy, dirty. Yeah, I'm charging a cleaning fee. Inside and outside of appliances, we take photos of the serial numbers of appliances so you can make sure it's the same appliance at move out that it was at move in. And that also gives you a maintenance leg up. If you have an issue, a heating element goes out in your oven, you can order the part before you make a trip to the property because you know the serial and model number. So at move in, we're documenting every square inch of the place, and then we're doing the same thing at move out. And now you've got a side-by-side report that you can compare where the tenant goes, oh, it was like that when I moved in. And you go, oh, you're right, it was like that, you shouldn't be charged. Or no, it wasn't, and I can show you that it wasn't. Here's a photo from an independent third party showing before and showing after. I've got neutral, unbiased documentation showing that. The other 2 main categories are lease renewals and periodics. And, the way it's the same report. It's just about timing. Lease renewal is at the end of the lease before you renew, where you're looking at it, just like you were saying, is this tenant worthy of renewal? If they are worthy of renewal, do I need to make any adjustment to the rent to cover the way that they're treating the property? And then, a periodic assessment is just mid-lease, that month 3 or month 6, where you're going, hey, I don't want to wait until the end of the lease and find out this house has been abused or they haven't changed the air filter once in a year or, whatever the case may be. Like, I want to get in there early, not too early. I think 3 months is about as early as you want to get in there because if you get in there too early, like you were saying earlier, you're not really getting a sense for how they're caring for the house. But another one that a lot of our clients use us for, and Peter Lohman did a really great episode on this recently, talking about initial or acquisition assessment. Did you sit in on that?
I did, yeah.
It was terrific. And a lot of our clients use us for that. The initial is basically the timeline on that is do that before you start managing the house. And it has two main purposes. One, just like a move in, move out, document the condition of the property to say, this is how it was when I started managing it. So when they come back in 6 months and go, Todd, how did you let this happen? You're like, oh, contraire, bonjour. It was like that before I started managing it. You can go back and talk to your previous manager. You left them for a reason. Here it is, you know. But the other thing is, and I think this was, Peter articulated this beautifully. It's setting expectations with that landlord, going in and saying, hey, listen, these are the things we found in your initial assessment. You need, in order to be in compliance with tenant landlord law, you need smoke alarms in these rooms, and you need a CO alarm here, and we need to add this to that or take this out. This is a risk or a liability for you. But you establish that rapport with them where you look at it and go, let's look at this and talk about what you need to do for this to be an effective rental property. And you kind of build that trust relationship right there at the front. And you get an idea if they come back and go, no, I don't want to add smoke alarms. You go, okay, then I don't want to manage your property because that's a legal requirement. Like that's not a thing you can decide not to do, you know? So a lot of people use us for that initial assessment to get, you know, documentation. And then they can go back to the landlord and go, hey, based on what we're seeing in these photos, these are our professional recommendations as to what needs to happen at this property.
Nice, nice. How, and I think people might be surprised at the answer you give me here. How long does it take one of your guys to do a move in, move out, or a periodic inspection?
Yeah, so move in, move outs, we actually budget an hour per 1,000 square feet. So if it's a 3,000 square foot house, we assume we're going to be there for 3 hours. Truthfully, move ins are a lot faster than move outs because if the property manager has done a good job, there's not as many issues to document. Move outs, you got however long the tenant's been living there that they've been creating destruction at that property. You got a lot more things to document. So, you know, the size of the house matters, and then the condition of the property matters. But about 1,000 or about an hour per 1,000 square feet on a move in, move out. It's about 30, 35 minutes per 1,000 square feet on a periodic, sometimes even faster. Again, it just depends on the condition of the property. If the resident's taking care of it, you can get in and out of there pretty quickly. But if they're not, you're going to be there for a while.
Love it.
So, and we also, you know, we do some basic maintenance while we're there. So like I was talking to Mike Williams, our lead technician in Nashville, and he was at a house on a periodic for like 4.5 hours the other day because he had to install 7 smoke alarms because none of the smoke alarms were working. So depending on the condition of it, you can be there longer.
Yeah, the reason because I knew that answer from you because I'd heard you talk about it before, and the reason I bring it up is most property managers who hear that are like, "Oh, wow, that's a lot longer than I spent doing inspections." Because I mean,
Yeah.
I'm pretty thorough. You know, when I used to
Right.
do them way back in the day, you know, 2012, 2013, I'd be really thorough. It'd maybe take me, I don't know, an hour to do a really thorough movement or what I thought was really thorough movement inspection, and
Yeah.
you guys would have budgeted 2.5, 3 hours for that. And the
Yeah.
reason for that is, like you said, I mean, you guys are literally opening every cabinet. You're getting, you know,
Mhm.
a view and everything that's gonna. I didn't do that, you know. I mean,
Yeah.
I thought I was being pretty detailed, but I wasn't being that detailed. And then the other thing, you know, is you guys are checking things that I never thought to check. So I learned from you guys. Actually, I never even knew this. I had been licensed for probably 5 years at the time, and then you guys sent in a report that said this fire detector or this fire alarm is, or the smoke alarm is expired. And I was
Mhm.
like, expired? How does an electronic device expire? And I can't remember if I talked to you or if it was Mark Innes or who I talked to at the time. It was like, yeah, they only last for like 7 years. They got a date stamped right on them. Don't you know that?
Yeah.
No, I had no idea. So, you
Yeah.
know, we had all these houses. So, I mean, there was like a year there where we were replacing smoke detectors left and right when you guys started working with us.
Yeah.
And you know, I had a consulting client the other day I was talking to about this because they don't even check the smoke detectors, and a lot of property managers don't. And I said, this is actually a liability issue for you. If that house burns down, let's say the house, well, a terrible situation, house burns down, the tenant's kid dies in this fire. What do you think's going to happen to you if the
Yeah.
fire marshal goes out, they're inspecting this house and they find that every smoke detector in the house expired 10 years ago? You think you're
Yeah.
going to make it out of that okay and not be bankrupted and your business disappear, and not to mention the guilt you're going to have from knowing that you probably caused this?
Yeah.
So I mean, the level of detail that OnSight Pros is getting into and literally teaching me, a property manager, as to what to look for, I think is really relevant here, because most property managers, number one, even if they want to be that detailed, they just don't have the time. They're usually rushing from one thing to the next, and they're not able to budget 3 hours for a move-in inspection. So
That's right.
it's
Yeah.
one of the great
Well,
things about outsourcing this.
and I'll tell you a couple of relevant stories to that. I got a text one time from a client of ours in Pensacola, Florida, and he was like, dude, look at this alarm that you guys found this week in one of my houses. Todd, it was manufactured in 1978. And I texted him back and I was like, that alarm was born before I was.
Same.
Like, this is a
Yes.
problem, you know? But I mean, the fact of the matter is, if we pull down every trip to the property, we pull down every alarm and we look at the back of the alarm to make sure that it's in date. And a lot of property managers aren't taking a ladder to the property to where they can do that. And even if they are taking a ladder, they don't have the time to do that because you've got so many other things on your plate. Um, Another story, a client in Charlotte, North Carolina, unfortunately did have a house that absolutely burned to the very ground. And she told me, she's like, man, I was so thankful for y'all's report because we had just done a report there like 3 months before. And she said, I pulled up to the house and I saw the fire marshal walking out and he had a stack of smoke alarms and he was just kind of walking around with them like this. And she walked up and she was like, hey, what's the deal? And he's like, we're going to just check and make sure that everything was what it was supposed to be. And she said, well, hey, listen, I've got this. And she pulls out our report on her phone. She's like, this shows where they were, that they were in date and that we had an independent third party test them with smoke in a can and that they were functional. She said he walked over and threw them in the dumpster and said, that's good. That's all I needed to know. So
That's
like
awesome.
that kind of documentation really can protect you. But he was going to make sure, because exactly what you're talking about, if those alarms were expired, that's exactly where that would have gone, is that would have been a legal nightmare for that property manager. But fortunately, because we have learned from our clients over the years all the things to look for, um, we've learned that that's a really important thing and a way we can protect them.
Yeah, and I mean it's not just for those situations as far as having a third party. I mean, I've had cases. I haven't had a lot of security deposit lawsuits. That's not a normal thing here in the Southeast like it is out on the West Coast, but we have had a few here and there, maybe 3 or 4 lawsuits over the years dealing with security deposits. And I remember one time I actually did use an on-site pros report when we were at court, and it just it carries more weight when it's
Mhm.
not you. If
Yeah.
in the old days it was just our inspector scribbling on a paper form, or even if it was us
Right.
with it was the inspector a rent check. I mean, it's still us,
Yeah.
and we have a vested interest in what
Yeah.
that report says.
Right.
Because, number one, we want to protect ourselves, but number two, we don't want us to look bad to the landlord and that sort of thing. So if we're doing the report and a judge looks at it, he's like, well, yeah, your report looks good, but maybe you didn't take a photo of these walls over here, or maybe you just avoided that because you didn't want to show that to somebody. When we can hand the judge a 50-page report that's got not just our name, it's got on-site pros on there, and we can say, no, no, no,
Yeah.
this isn't us. This is a third party who their entire job is to do inspections. The
That's right.
judge can look at that and say, oh, okay, well, that's certainly more credible than
Yeah.
just you doing something. So, and that's how it
Yeah.
basically. I mean, we don't have a bad environment for judges here. I didn't expect to have a problem from this judge. They all know me by name, but still, it
Is that
gives
a good
more
thing or a bad
credibility.
thing?
Yeah, it's in this case that's actually a good thing. But yeah, I mean, it helps. It's important. So
Yeah.
everybody remember that. If you do have on-site pros in your market, even if you're doing great inspections and everything, there's added value to having
Yeah.
somebody who's a third party to do it.
And that's something that we've talked to several people when they're onboarding. They'll ask, "Hey, can I white label your report and put my logo on it?" And frankly, our software has that capability. But I always have the same conversation with them, and I say, "Hey, listen, you can do that. I recommend that you don't for two reasons. One, the credibility in a courtroom of having our logo on it, where it's saying, hey, this is an independent third party that is saying this at this time was the condition of the property. That carries a lot more weight than you who do have a dog in the hunt, that you have a reason to hide things or to obscure things. We don't. And so that carries value. But two, it adds to the transparency and trust that it builds between you and the landlord, where you can say, hey, listen, you deserve to see the asset that I'm managing, and we want you to see it as it is. If we go out there and document the condition of the property, we can show you what we want you to see. So we are actually sending an independent third party because we want you, because a lot of people are like, man, will my landlords be okay that I'm not going to the property, that I'm sending a third party? The feedback that we've gotten from our clients is their landlords love it because they go, I like the independent perspective where I know nothing is being hidden from me, that it's just a third party documenting the condition as is. And that builds a radical transparency and trust between the owner and the property manager that I think has real tangible value.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, that actually makes me think of somebody that I think both of us know, Leor over at Blanket, who's
Blanket, yeah.
their big thing that they've been talking about since they've come on the scene here the last couple of years is, being an asset manager and being
That's
more of
right.
an advisor to owners and having that transparency and that level of trust with the client. And I mean, the way you get there is this sort of thing, like you say, that sort of radical transparency where it's, look, we aren't trying to hide anything from you. We're,
Yeah.
it's just like me always saying, we don't have any sort of hidden fees or anything. It's all in the contract. You're not going to have
Mm,
anything stumble. It's not going to be a surprise to you. We're going to do everything
yeah.
we can to let you know. Now, there's still some people who will complain about things anyway. You can't avoid that, but you still, if you take that attitude that we want to be as transparent as possible, we want to give you as much information as we can, and we want to be proactive with doing it and not just waiting for you to say, hey, what's going on with my house? And then
Mm,
you go out and do no. This should be something you're just doing on a regular basis and building that trust and having that transparency just generally as part of your operation. So,
right.
I think this goes a long way towards doing that sort of thing.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And it's one of those things where even I think that is demonstrated in, we've had stories from multiple clients that talk about when they were doing their own assessments, they would call things out to the landlord and say, hey, you need to do this, this, and this. And the landlord would go, defer. And we had a client right there in Atlanta who said the first time, they had been saying for 5 years stuff that needed to be done. And the first time that they sent us out, the landlord called them angry, going, you need to do this, this, and this. Why isn't this done? And they're like, we've been trying to convince you to do that for 5 years, But when they saw it from an independent third party, and we don't even tell people, hey, you should do this. We tell our technicians, describe, don't prescribe. We say, describe what you see. Our job is not to say what we think should be done about it. That's between you and the landlord. But when they see that and it's photographic and it's neutral and objective, and they don't feel like they're being sold something because they have a suspicion when it's coming from the property manager, oh, you just want to get in my pocket.
Yeah.
But when it's coming from a third party, they look at it and go, oh, this is the condition of the property. I need to fix that. So there's just some barriers that come down there that I don't know all the psychological underpinnings of it, but it's a real thing, and we've had multiple clients tell us that they've had that experience.
Nice. Well, the last thing I want to cover before we take any questions that come in is something that we talked about in the, before we joined the live call. And yes, everybody, we do pre-interviews. They do those on before the Tonight Show also. I don't mean to burst your bubble, but those aren't spontaneous.
You're
But
not supposed to
we've
pull
got,
back the curtain, Todd. Let's
yeah.
let Oz stay behind the veil.
But we were talking beforehand about, with the proliferation of so much automation and AI and everything that's going on within the industry, because the industry has had this radical transformation in the time that just you and I have been in the industry. I mean, obviously
Yeah.
there's people that have been in the industry a lot longer than us. I mean, we can look at, Kelly Tollefson or, plenty of people have been in the industry for decades. And, I can't imagine what it's looked like to them, but even for us, we used to have nothing in the technology realm in property management. We were operating off of pen and paper, and it was like the Stone Age, 15 years
Right.
ago. And nowadays it's all AI, and every software has to
Mm.
be integrated with AI, and that's all for the most part a good thing. I would say it is helping us to advance as an industry. But at the same time, you had mentioned something that I really think is true, which is if you take it to the extreme and you
Mhm.
try to automate everything, then you're kind of eliminating your importance to the landlord. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, and I'm not talking about, process flows and efficiency. And I mean, that's exactly what you do so well. And you teach property managers how to do that, and you make them better at what they do. But what I'm talking about is, again, you go back to things like the tenant self-inspections and things like that. The challenge with it is when we automate so much. I'll tell you what has blown my mind is we've had a massive growth over the last couple of years of individual landlords using us as clients, and we actively don't want that. Like, we charge individual landlords $100 per report more than we charge our clients, because they're just hard to deal with. I'm just being transparent. We do
Believe
no
me, we know.
marketing. Yeah, I know. Yeah, like that surprises any property manager. But the fact of the matter is, we're still growing that segment. They're finding us, and a lot of them are coming to us going, "Hey, I want you to do my reports because the property manager that I used to use was using you, and I loved the reports, but they're doing less and less and less and less, and they were doing so little that I'm just going to manage it myself." We get to a point where we rely on software and technology, and there are technologies and softwares out there for landlords now
Mhm.
that are free or really inexpensive because they're harvesting the data, right? So they're not selling the landlord a subscription for a software as a service. They want their data. So they're giving them the software for free. If we get to a place as an industry that we are letting everything be artificial intelligence, we're letting everything be tenant led, we're letting everything be, if we stop doing the hard things that make us valuable because we want to do it cheap and we want to do it easy and we want to, whatever, we lose our value, that inherent value that we create, because the nature of property management is, hey, being a landlord is hard, and we're going to do the hard things for you. But in the industry where we stop doing the hard things, we've lost our whole value proposition, and it's easier and cheaper for the landlord to just do it themselves. If we're going to do as little as they would do, we've lost our value. So I think we still have to lean into doing those hard things that bring us value, and we have to bring in expertise that they can't get from a software. We still have to create that asset management mentality that Lior talks about. It really is the direction that the industry has to go, because if we go along with this race to the bottom, where we do as little as we can and charge as much as we can, third party property management is going to cease to exist as a category. Because if we're not creating value, why do they pay money when they can use the same tools to do the same things that we're going to use?
Amen. Yeah, well, I've got a few thoughts on that. While I'm pontificating, as I do, if you want to pull up a copy of one of your inspection reports, I want to show it to
Yeah,
everybody.
sure.
We're going to show everybody an actual live report. But what I wanted to say on that was there's a real balancing act to this. I think where there is a comfy middle ground where you use technology, you use automation, you supplement with some AI, but you can't let it permeate the entire business. There's I wrote an article earlier today that probably a bunch of you got, talking about all the influencers and everything in the industry. There's one in particular that's just acting like AI is the answer to everything. Eventually everything's going to be AI. You're not going to need people. We're just going to have AI agents who take care of maintenance and leasing, and everything's going to be AI. And that just, number one, it's just soulless, and nobody is going to latch onto that. No one is going to look at that product and say that's something that I want. There might be some people who are just dirt cheap, who the kind of clients you've never wanted to have anyway, who might gravitate towards that. But most of your clients, the people who are paying you to be a property manager, that's not what they're looking for. They do want you to be efficient to a certain extent to keep their costs down, but they still want you to be the property manager, the asset
That's
manager.
right.
So, if you just think that you can eliminate all your staff and just replace everybody with AI agents and start calling them coworkers or teammates, that's craziness. And it's just that is going to result in a world where basically there's a few boutique property managers who are still doing some human touch and attracting people, and then everybody else is just like Phil said, using free landlord software that's out there for them to do it themselves with their own AI. So, we need to, as an industry, I think, find the right balance to this where we are being efficient, but we're also providing that real service. So that's my thoughts on it anyway. But Phil, yeah, show us a report. What you
Yeah,
got?
absolutely. And I did not pre-screen this, Todd. I logged into your portal, and I hope I'm not about to show something that will be damaging or embarrassing. I just picked a random report, so apologies. Hopefully, we don't like show like a toilet full of poop on a webinar right now. But so yeah, this is what a report with us looks like. And this is what you were talking about, Todd. We document every smoke alarm in the property. Where did we find it? What's the expiration date? And when we sprayed it with smoke in a can, did it pass or did it fail? We also find the air filter. Where did we find that? What was the size and what was the condition? For those of you who use a service like Second Nature, one of the things that we can do for you is after we've been to all your properties, we can actually send you a list of all of the air filter sizes that you have. And that makes, that whole shipment of air filters a whole lot easier when you have that documented. But, and you can go and look. So this air filter was found in the hallway stairway. So we can go and look at hallway stairway and just look and go, okay, here's the front of the filter. Here's the back of the filter. And then here is the size of it, and we also initial and date it. So if you go back out 3 months from now and the initials and date are still there, even if it looks okay, that air filter hasn't been changed in 3 months. But you can see this little red 2 next to the hallway stairway. That means there were 2 items in that room that we said, hey, you may or may not care about this, but we just want to point it out. Looks like we found a little gouge in the carpet right here. Which you may look at it mid-lease and go, I don't care. And you may go, hey, I want to go ahead and deal with that while they're in there. I don't want to wait for that to get caught by the security deposit because they might exceed the security deposit. So you can decide whether you want to do that. Here you can look at it and go, nails backing out, I don't care. Whatever. Or you can go, yeah, that's a problem to me. If that's a problem to you, you need to take a deep breath and get out of this industry because you're going to stress about a lot of things if a nail backing out causes you to lose sleep at night. But one of the cool things is like, if you see this and you go, hey, I actually do want to do something about that, you can click add to punch list and say, hey, who's going to be responsible for this? Is this normal wear and tear? Okay, the landlord. Is this a tenant damage? Whatever. You can give a cost and give a comment explaining why you're doing what you're doing. And you can create that punch list report and send a report just of the items that you say, hey, these are actionable items. And that report can have your logo on it because that's not our statement. Our statement is this is the condition of the property. That is your ability to take that report and say, this is what I, as your professional property manager, think should happen about the condition of that property. So that's a cool thing. You can also take, and I don't know how many times we've been to this property. I'm going to hit compare here and just see. We've only been to this property once, so this might be relatively new in your portfolio. Is this new?
Yeah. I
But if
think
it had multiple trips to the property, you would see, each trip to the property and how many items were marked as needs attention to go, hey, last time we were there, it was 4. This time it was 40. Okay, we got a problem. They're not taking care of the property. But you can click the little button next to each of them and hit compare and see the side-by-side photos in each room to see how it's changing over time. So, it's just kind of a neat way to look at the properties and be able to show, what's happening at different times. On the move in and move outs, we've got the 360 camera where you can see that compare feature is really neat on the move in and move outs where, you can look back and go, was it like that before? Oh, it was. Oh, wait, no, it wasn't. I'm going to charge them for that. And add that to your punch list and keep rolling. So
Nice. Very good. Very good. Well, we got a couple questions here to get to before we wrap up for the day. First one we've got is, how do you deal with staff who might be fearful when OnSight Pros gets hired? If you've got OnSight or if you've got your own people who have been doing inspections, how do you answer that question, Phil?
Yeah, I mean, and we've had that question. It's not a usual question because most of the time the staff is really enthusiastic because they hate doing these. And so they're like, so we cannot do that anymore. We'd love that. But there are people who go, wait a minute, what am I going to do? And the fact of the matter is, you still have to have people who review this. You still have to have people who decide what do we care about, what's our action plan. You still have to have people who are going to organize the maintenance and then, check up to make sure that things were done. So it's not about replacing the people on your staff. It's about making them more efficient, especially if you're using property managers for this. Because the fact of the matter is, if you're driving to and from, scheduling reports, walking the properties, come back and creating reports, that is not the highest and best use of your time. You could be using that time to be available to your residents when they need you, to be available to your clients when they need you, and to be able to available when a new prospect calls and wants somebody to manage a property. If you're in the field doing that, you're missing those calls, you're missing those opportunities. Um, I, I think the thing I would tell staff is, hey, this doesn't make you irrelevant. This allows us to use you at your highest and best value. But
Yeah.
I will say there are some people that have come back to us later and they were like, "Hey, turns out my staff was right to not want you guys to do this because we found out later that they were actually not going and doing it. They were just using, I'm going to be in the field doing inspections, and then they were like going to the movies or whatever, and that was like their get out of the office free card. But as long as they're doing their job, we liberate property managers to do the things that property managers can and should be doing to serve their clients and their residents well, is what I would tell them.
That gets right back to what we were talking about with Leor and being the asset manager. Is you're much better
Right.
off not as a property manager, not spending your time looking through houses and taking photos. You're better off taking the report that OnSight has created for you and then making recommendations to owners based on that report. I mean, that's what you should be doing. That's a much better use of your time, and that's something you couldn't do before if all your time was spent in the field just going to houses.
That's
So,
right.
to me, that's what's important. Question from the crowd: do you inspect appliances to see whether they're moving or whether they're working when you do move in and move out reports?
We don't currently. We document the physical condition. We don't document the functionality. And that really, our legal counsel and insurance agent said, not only should you guys not do that, but you should advise your clients not to do that. Because, of the hundreds of houses that you go to, it only takes that one where you turn 4 burners off and turn 4 burners on and 3 burners off, and you burn a house to the ground. What we do and what we recommend that property managers do is we document the physical condition of it for the sake of security deposit disputes, but then let the resident document the functionality at move in. We have an app called My Walkthrough, or you can use Z Inspector or whatever software you're doing, where you can let them say, hey, is there anything that's not functional in this? And you can remedy that quickly. But putting that burden on them limits your liability, so that you aren't responsible if a burner is not turned off or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, and my advice to people out there is similar to that. It's not. So I mean, that's a perfect example of where you can make a big mistake doing those things. But another thing you got to think about is, let's say you're checking the functionality of a dishwasher, for example, and you just turn the one mode on. You just make sure the water starts. And you say, oh, it's working. And then you mark it as working, and you send that report off to the owner. And then 2 weeks later, the tenant moves in, and they put it in a different mode, and it doesn't work. And now the
Yeah,
owner's mad at you because you
that's
said
right.
it worked.
Yeah,
So, that you can't possibly check all the functionality of these things in
yeah,
the time you're there. And I actually have a clause, if you look in our template management agreement, if you're a PMAssist insider, it actually says we are not home inspectors. The contractors we use are not licensed home inspectors, and we are not documenting functionality or legality of any of your stuff. We're documenting condition. That's all it
that's
is.
right.
We just want to know, did the tenant break it, damage it, whatever it may. That's all we care about. So,
That's
you know,
exactly right. And that's
that's my
exactly like we're documenting the physical condition of it so that if at move out a burner's not working and you look at it and it's cockeyed where they stood on the stove to get to the cabinet above, you go, okay, I'm charging you for it. But if they move out and it's just not working, you go, sometimes stuff stops working. Like that's not a tenant charge. So what we're trying to do is give you at move in and move out the evidence that you need to go, okay, was it physically in okay condition? You know, it's more for security deposit disputes than it is for the actual functionality.
Gotcha. We're running out of time, so we need to get through these quick, but we do have a couple more questions. It says, can you customize what you send to the owner? Like, can you send a punch list? We do not share the full report. We find owners judge tenants too much, and it feels close to fair housing issues. What are your thoughts there, Phil?
Yeah. So the answer is yes, you can. Like you can just create the punch list and just send that if you want to. I will tell you one of the things that we train our technicians on, as opposed to a move in, move out, which documents every square foot of the property, a periodic, we only do overview and issues. But we're taking a lot less photos. We're looking at the same scope of work, but we're really only taking overview and issues photos. Like we're not taking a picture of every doorstop on a periodic like we do on a move in, move out. But we're also very careful to try to not get pictures of humans, even pictures of humans, you know, because we don't want to introduce any kind of fair housing issues so that, you know, you can avoid those kinds of things. But yes, you absolutely can just curate your own report and send just the punch list if you wanted to do that. I don't think that goes back towards that radical transparency we were talking about. That kind of defeats the spirit of that. But I'm sure we have clients that all they send is the punch list. I don't know that, but I would assume that there are people out there who do that for sure.
Gotcha. Next question, talking about multifamily, so apartment buildings. How does that work? If you're doing apartment buildings, are you documenting common areas, you know, external, you know, HVAC, air handlers, that kind of stuff, or are you just doing that unit of the property?
Yeah, it depends on the client. So like if they're sending us saying, "Hey, we have this 30 unit apartment and we want you to document the whole thing and we want you to document the common areas," we can do that. Normally, they're saying, "Hey, I want you to go document unit 2." And so we wouldn't document all the common areas when we're just there to document that one unit. But we have had circumstances where somebody's like, "Hey, I want you to go and document 123 Daisy Street with these 30 units, and I want to see the swimming pool, and I want to see the gym, and I want to see the office area." We can do all that.
Nice, nice. All right, one last question, and then I'll tell everybody, or Phil will tell everybody how to get in touch with him. But do you conduct vacant property surveys? And if so, what are some of the main things you're paying attention to on those type of visits versus a tenant in place periodic?
Yeah. So on the vacants, you know, we really are looking at documenting every square foot because you want to be able to say this is the condition at this time. You know, again, inside and outside of appliances, inside and outside of drawers. Like you want to look at every square inch of everything on a vacant versus a periodic. You're not opening cabinets and drawers. That's invasive. Like you're not getting inside of that. But yes, absolutely vacants. I mean, that's 50% of what we do is vacant properties, where you're documenting the exterior, the interior. You know, you want to document every square foot of that exterior so that you can show, hey, I can see there were screens in the windows, and then at move out, there's a tear in that one, and there's a missing one there. You're able to kind of look at it and say, here's the difference between move in and move out. Whereas periodics, you're not getting as invasive into the residence space.
Excellent, excellent. Well, when we were doing our pre-interview, Phil was wondering, you know, how long we would do these, and I said, well, it just depends on how interesting the conversation is. But we've gone a full hour, so pretty interesting, pretty interesting discussion here on inspections and property awareness. I want everybody to know how they can get in touch with you, Phil. But first thing I will say is I will just give a ringing endorsement to OnSight Pros and just to Phil as a person, to be quite honest. One of the best companies we work with. Everybody there is fantastic. They've done amazing work for us for years now. So I thoroughly recommend them to everybody. I know they aren't in every market, but I will say if you look at their website, you don't see that they're in your market. If you've got a lot of doors or you have a few friends that have some doors, they'll open a market for you if you're making
That's
it
right.
worth their while. So Phil, how can people get in touch with you guys if they're interested?
Yeah, you can go to our website at OnSight Pros, and that's on SIGHT, like visual sight, ONSIGHT pros, PROS.com. Or you can email me at Phil, PHIL, at onsightpros.com. And like Todd said, we're expanding all the time. We just opened up the DC Metro up in Northern Virginia. We had a conversation this morning in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania area. So we're exploring new areas all the time, but we're also in 13 states and 27 different metropolitan areas at this point. So there's a lot of folks that we serve, but we're expanding those borders all the time.
Love it. All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us today. Phil, of course, thank you. We appreciate it. This is a great conversation. We'll get it out to everybody on an email also coming up. Abby will take care of that so everybody can see your recording. We'll be back next month with another partner webinar, hopefully as good as this one, and we'll see everybody then. Have a good weekend.
Thanks, guys. See ya.